we have to make some serious moves, and we already know coming up in 2024 things will come. But it's not about 2024, and the scary part is we always say we need to get ready for 2024, but we should be getting ready for today, the next day, the day after that, because it's not just 2024 we need to worry about, because when we worry about 2024, what happens is when 2025 hits, we got issues. When 2023 is still going on, we got issues. So they're going to discuss all of these things and more, because I already know, if Marcus is moderating, he already pulled some dynamic folks to the table, folks that are actually doing some work, folks that are actually engaged in this work, and folks that are actually caring about this work. So we thank you for staying to engage in this panel and to hear what we got to say today. So I'm going to be quiet and bring it over and turn it over to Mr. Marcus Bass, North Carolina Black Alliance.
Y'all keep clapping for TC. Please keep clapping for TC. I don't think y'all know. We don't know what to do with him, but we don't know where we would be without him. My God. I want you to give yourselves a hand too. Now, we have gone through a service in just day one. This has been, I think, this morning, I was Episcopalian, I was Presbyterian by lunchtime. Now I'm back Baptist. But it's important not just to come for the call to worship, but it's important to be here for the benediction. Because the blessing, right? I'm from Sampson County. They tell you the blessing is in the benediction. Anybody can come at the beginning, but to stay to the end, to get it down to the last drop, is where the good stuff is at. Anytime Reverend Nelson and First Lady Joyce Johnson call us, we come, right? And I think about how many times throughout history they have called us and we have come. And this space is sacred in so many ways. And so I feel very fortunate to be here for this discussion in the midst of what is probably going to be one of the only solutions that carries all of us from the darkness that we're in right now to the marvelous light of freedom and liberation. I'm excited about the panelists that are going to be before you all today, and I'm going to make one audible, if you don't mind, Bridget. I think we're missing a young person on this panel. And so I don't know if there is someone here that just may happen to be a student or a previously graduated person, but I see two people that I think that could add some value. So I'm gonna let the Spirit move them to come down as they laugh and grin and giggle. Y'all, don't you come on down, Brittany and Miles, and let's see if we can, let's give them a round of applause. Y'all come on there, Brittany, come on, Brittany. Be obedient. I just think it's critical to make sure that we are not talking to folks, we're talking with each other. And so I want to make sure when we have this conversation, Miles is not just a student, but he is a leader of today and has been engaged with organizations doing this work. Just this week, they released the voting maps across the state of North Carolina. And Miles, with Common Cause, has been one of the groups that have led the charge in making sure that these maps are not just something that are passed and then brushed under the rug, but something that we can fight around, all right? Because we like to talk about why black men ain't voting. We like to talk about why college students ain't voting. But again, I come from the country. And if any of you have ever gone fishing and you see fish laying on the side of the water, you don't think that there's something wrong with the fish. You think there's something wrong with the environment that the fish is in. If you see birds falling out of the sky on the ground, you don't just examine the birds, you examine the environment in which caused the birds to fall. And so we're not here to pick on young people. We're not here to talk about why black men aren't voting, because we're not stupid in this room. We know that the solutions are not that far removed from the dollar investment of our state and our nation. But for some reason, we continue to get our issues passed aside and in exchange a vote for the person that is already decided upon based on the lines that are being drawn. And then we look at these people that are stopping voting as if they're idiots when we forget the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And so today, these are not the people in the room that we need to be encouraging to vote. But what we're going to talk about today are the people that are examining the environment, that are looking very closely at the ecosystem, and then also not figuring out how to bring the political process, bring the people closer to the political process. They're working to bring the process closer to the people. And so without further ado, I want to start with my left, Dreama, and come all the way down. I wish, the only thing about this panel that I will say, we did not tell the panelists how to dress. And we should have sent out a dress code advisory for one panelist in particular. And I'm going to let you all decide who that one panelist is when we get to them. They forgot that we just one block away from the greatest university on earth. But we're going to let him live because he's a pastor, he's a man of God, he's a reverend. So we're going to respect the cloth, the clerical cloth, not that cloth on him. All right, let's get it. Can we have some fun, everybody? Can we laugh? Can we enjoy ourselves? Let's do this now. Let's loosen up. We are about to go through hell in 2024. We just went through hell in 2023. So I'm not sitting here to just sit and get. I need to get motivated. I need to have something happen in the next 3 days when we go from this place, walking together today, tomorrow, and then walking together on Saturday. I want to feel energized and boosted up. And so I'm very thankful for your time and your attention. We're going to go straight into it. Dreama, let us know who you are, the organization you represent, and in particular, anything you want to start us off in this opening.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Dreama Caldwell. I'm the executive co-director of Down Home, North Carolina. Down Home actually is my political home, so I came into leadership through membership. And so it is the first place that I learned about politics and learned that my family wasn't poor because we didn't work hard enough, right? It was the first place that I understood that it was much more than just not working hard enough. And so in Down Home, we organize in rural areas where people aren't organizing. We're in 8 counties here in North Carolina. And we start at a local level of organizing around local issues. We do run issue-based campaigns around issues that members decide that they would like to run. And then we have an integrated base building model where at the end of those campaigns, whether they win or they lose, we debrief those campaigns to figure out what happened and why we didn't win. And then we move into our election season. And we do elections work. We also are able to endorse candidates as well. But one of the most particular and most pride for me work we do is our leadership development. There are leaders all over the state that just need some help learning some skills to build the power that they need in their communities. And so leadership development has me here in this seat today, and so it is the most important part of the work that we do.
Thank you, Dreama. Serena?
Good afternoon. My name is Serena Sebring. I use she and her pronouns. It's a joy to be with you all today. I'm honored to serve as Executive Director of Blueprint North Carolina. Blueprint is really a testament to the importance, the political importance and imperative of relationships. We understand after over 15 years of collaborative work what is possible when we do together what we cannot do alone. For our partners, that has meant collecting almost 1 million voter registration cards over the last 10 years together. Currently, Blueprint partners are responsible for civic engagement in all 100 counties. And increasingly, we have been adding to that civic engagement portfolio, not just get out the vote, not just voter registration, not just voter education, which are critical elements, but also voter protection, election protection, and the strengthening of our safety when we come to the polls. This is a critical issue in a time of political violence, and I think we have a chance when we ask people to really see about each other, to make sure that all of us have the ability to vote comfortably, safely, with celebration and joy, that what we see is actually what democracy looks like. And so it's really an honor to talk to you all today. This truth and reconciliation process is, I think, another critical element of what it means to have safe communities where a multiracial and inclusive democracy becomes possible. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking.
All right, Brother Weathers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reverend Stefan Weathers Sr., and as Marcus not so eloquently pointed out, I am a graduate and alum of the North Carolina Central University. So Eagle Pride for those in the building who are Eagles. That's what I'll talk about. But yeah, so in this capacity today, though, I am here representing Democracy North Carolina. I serve as the organizing program associate for DemNC, which is a nonpartisan voting rights advocacy organization that works throughout the state. So in the role that I have, I am a part of the programmatic arm of the organizing team, so that two critical pieces of that are our Democracy Summer we call them Friend-Turns, but Friend-Turnship program, which helps to train up the next generation of leaders in the civic engagement work that we seek to do throughout the state. And also our nonprofit voter engagement program, which is a re-granting program. So we get a grant to re-grant out to other organizations who are already working with communities. I see a couple of our partners actually in the building today, but we give that money out so that they can do the voter engagement work in their communities, not us hovering over or saying we're gonna come in and we know what's best, but for the ways in which those organizations are able to reach their people, we assist in that process. So that's who we are, that's who I am, and so there it is.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. You would have got more claps if you'd have wore a different sweatshirt. That's the last time, Rev. That's the last time. He shouldn't. If he'd have wore a Duke shirt, it'd have even been all right if he'd have did Duke. No. So, okay, all right, Bridget, I got you. We're gonna make the main thing the main thing. Next, let's go to Mr. Gary Kenton.
Gary Kenton, I am here representing the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. The League of Women Voters is a unique organization with a federal LWVUS, LWVNC, and I also serve on the board of the League of Women Voters of the Piedmont Triad. And I don't want to get in the middle of anything here, but I'm also an honorary Aggie. I teach at North Carolina A&T State University. Yeah. So thank you. When I'm talking to my students, it's a difficult thing because I talk a lot about civics and voting, and some of my students, their analysis is, and no one's ever said this exactly to me, but this is the gist I get, is what has the government or the system ever done for me? And in a climate like we have right now, they look and it's a bunch of clowns, you know, why would I engage in this? And I tell them, I'm not arguing with you, you're right, vote anyway, you know, that we have these levers that we can use, and I encourage them to do what I do. There's nothing more within the system in the process than the League of Women Voters, but I often find the need to work with other organizations that are more, are closer to the street, shall we say, like the Beloved Community Center. So I go to those organizations when I need to do that. So try to encourage my students to do both. And also the League of Women Voters are partners with these organizations.
Reverend Nelson and First Lady Joyce, I made an audible, and while you all were gone, TC said it was okay, so you could blame him if y'all don't like it. But we thought it not robbery to add a youth component to this conversation. Miles Beasley, student at St. Augustine's University. Miles.
You ain't right, but how you doing? My name is Miles Beasley. I am a senior broadcasting communications major at St. Augustine's University. He said we were only a block from the greatest. I don't know about that one. It took me an hour 30 to get here. But anywho, I am on campus. I serve as the student representative on the board of trustees. But the reason I'm really here is because I am a Common Cause campus fellow. I have a great passion for this work. I thought I would see more students in the room with me, But that's all good. You know, when there's none, one has to represent. So that's all I want to leave you guys with. But, you know, yeah, hopefully it's a good event.
All right, we're going to jump right into it. One of the things that we talked about when Bridget brought us together for our pre-panel conversation, and Reverend Johnson really reiterated this, is that the purpose of this space is for us to learn how to walk together. In this moment, we have to walk together. When we walk independently, they can take us out, and they have taken us out. One of the things that these organizations are all committed to doing is something called mass mobilization. How many people have heard of Souls to the Polls? It feels like a good chance for your church and clergy to come together, and I know Reverend Redrick will pull together in Charlotte as many folks as possible, and they'll go after service and they'll march to the polls, and that feels like a festive occasion. But how many people realize that that is an element of providing safety for black voters? In the midst of some of the most aggressive voting restrictions, in the midst of the violence that we're seeing across the South, January 6th, we saw a number of individuals that went to the nation's capital to form an insurrection. They took a page from the Wilmington coup d'etat and tried to go to D.C. and do the same thing. And don't you know, in the midst of that battle, Reverend Johnson, right alongside the Confederate flag, they flew the North Carolina flag. And so think about 4 years later, 3 years later, where are those people? They're still here. And not only are they still here, they're in elected office. They're on our boards of education. They're in our boards of election. They don't want to see reparations. They're going to run against those folks in High Point. And so when we talk about this notion of voter engagement in 2020 and what's at stake, there are elements here that are trying to subvert the vote in a way that is very intentional. So my first question is to Serena. One of the things that Blueprint has been doing is really identifying what these elements are doing, how they're organized, and how they could subvert our efforts. You heard 100,000 individuals they're trying to register and have been registering in their history. All that work can be undone, not because folks aren't voting, it's because they're being beat before they get to the polls. Tell us a little bit about that work, Serena.
Sure, I'm happy to, and thank you for the invitation to talk about it. I think I would be remiss, though, if in a conversation about political violence, I didn't surface what is going on globally in this moment. I know that many of us are here with heavy hearts and sadness, and I think I've never seen anything like the genocide that is playing out on our nightly news. And I think that has everything to do with democracy and what's at stake when we resort to violence instead of collective decision-making in order to determine what happens in our communities. So I surfaced that maybe just because I don't know what to do about it. And I don't want to go on business as usual while people are hurting, while people are being killed. When we do that, we can't have democracy. Right. So I just wanted to begin there. I think also in thinking about this, it does go back to me for 2020. And if you remember that time, and you know, it's all sort of awash since then, but in 2020, we were really preparing for the possibility of political violence beginning in about the summertime. We started to hear these horrible predictions about, you know, unrest, either in the elections or in the post-election period. And frankly, we had very little infrastructure, very little structures that would inform how do we face a moment like this, when it's not a question of how many doors we can knock, but is my life at stake when I'm doing this work? And that was true because of COVID, as well as the rise of extremism in that year. It was then that Blueprint began to do a couple of things that many people in this room have been part of since. One of them was to track threats to democracy and safety. It began with a really scary spreadsheet looking at what are incidents of previous voter intimidation that had happened at polling places. And we heard stories as recently as 2016, 2018 that included racial terrorism that included, displays of nooses outside of polling places, or coffins being brought out to early voting sites. I mean, things that people really felt we had left in a past that we want to forget, just like we want to forget the red-shirted militia that massacred black people in Wilmington in 1898, the only successful coup in American history. These are things that sometimes we don't want to talk about when we try to turn out voters. In fact, there's an existing wisdom that says, don't talk about threat. Don't talk about, what might be concerning, because we might discourage people from turning out. I can say that in 2020, we saw actually the opposite of that. Because we were tracking those threats, we had a sense of where we needed to build capacity to send our people. It was the first year that we did a program called Power, Protection, and Encouragement. Has anybody taken part in a Power, Protection, and Encouragement program here? I see your hands. Thank you for being what democracy looks like, because what it needed in that time is, I think, what it still needs. Power, Protection, and Encouragement put organizations at polling places during every day of early voting, trained folks in de-escalation, bystander intervention, but also had an element of joy to it. So parties at the polls, meet a safety squad, a fish fry, and a line dance. It's really hard to be escalated when that's the greeting that you get when you arrive to a polling place. And we also know how important it is for trusted local organizations to host these. We had about 750 of these during every day of early voting over the course of that year. 750 in 70 counties. There were 90 organizations that partnered with us. We got a very good snapshot of what happens at polling places across our state. And because of the training and the dedication of local volunteers, I can say in 2020, we heard not one report of political violence at the polls, save one place. And I'm glad that you mentioned Souls to the Polls, Marcus, because in 2020, the only political violence during that period that we saw was in Alamance County, when the sheriff tear gassed a Souls to the Polls march that happened to go next to a Confederate statue in downtown Graham. And you called me from there. And I remember how terrifying that was for some of the most visionary and powerful leaders in our democracy movement, including Marcus Bass, but also people who were just trying to vote. People who did not expect that if there would be violence, it would come from someone that had been elected by that community. These are the kinds of threats that we also have to think about. How are we prepared to deal with political violence means we can hold our elected officials accountable for keeping us safe or for making that more difficult to do. But first we have to show up, and we have to say, we are each other's business. And I will show up in the face of a threat. I will show up when I hear that there might be the potential for violence at the polls. And in fact, in 2020, that's exactly what happened. In the places where we had these programs, more voters turned out. When people knew that they could make the difference between their neighbor being able to cast a vote or not, they came out. They did not stay home. I think that there's a way that we talk about these incidents or these concerns or risks as though it might bring out the worst of us, but in experience, it brings out the best in us. And so I think that framing is important. We don't meet hate with silence.
It's Dr. Serena Sebring, everybody. So during that ordeal in Alamance County, I happened to meet a young woman who was running for office, and because of some of the subversive tactics in that area, after the election, instead of getting into office, she decided to work with an organization that was newly launched in Alamance County to talk about not just the implications of when we are divided, but what happens when we come together. And so Dreama Caldwell, the co-director of Down Home, has been doing that work. A lot of times folks look at this ladder of engagement and feel like the getting to the top is when you run for office, but it's not a ladder of engagement, it's a circle, a cycle. And so you never get off the cycle. You just continue to begin again. And Dreama, your beginning again is in a direct response to this racial element that lived in Alamance County long before we saw what happened in January 6th. Can you tell us a little bit about what that work looks like on the ground to bring these communities together in the midst of what seems like to be such a divisive political climate?
Yeah, I sit here every time I hear about 2020. I was a candidate at that time, and it brings all these feels in my body. So many things happened that day. When I decided to run, I ran a campaign out of East Burlington, which had never been done before, a black woman running for county commissioner, which had never been done before, and a candidate who was openly saying, move that monument. And so I got a spill of what those things bring to me as a candidate, and also watch my community become alive for the first time. My community engaged in elections. We had day parties at the nightclub. We had swimming parties. This is all while COVID is going on, and I know we probably should not have been doing these things, but we found that people were excited for the first time. People who had never voted before, 50, 60 years old, who had never engaged in the process, were engaging in the process. And what was significant about what happened in 2020, that was the last day of early voting. People had waited to register to vote that day. And they were gonna vote as a collective, and people who didn't get to vote because of the pepper spray incident. So it was blatant voter suppression for us, people who weren't able to vote. And so just after seeing the community come alive, seeing the numbers come in where black people were engaging and voting in Alamance County, I felt a call to this work. And so I came into this work as a career. And so for us, work on the ground looks like having front porch conversations, knocking on the door and talking to people. We're in rural North Carolina where no one's knocked on their doors. No party, no political candidate, no organization. So people are excited and ready to talk to you. One of the things that we've learned, whether it happened in Western North Carolina or whether it happened in Eastern North Carolina, we all want the same thing. We all want safe schools, we all want safe neighborhoods, we all want to make living wages, and we all want to go to the doctor when we're sick. And those are basic values that do not belong to a party. Those are basic values that belong to all of us as our birthright for being here. And so we continue to have those conversations on the doors. We also have a team that makes phone calls to have conversations with people, but not just have conversations, but invite them into the work. I think that is what's most important. We are experiencing 3 crises currently. We have the crisis of authoritarianism that is rising in our country. We also have a climate crisis that is gonna displace even some of us in this room at some point. And then we have a social crisis. I grew up in a neighborhood where we knew all of the neighbors on our block. How many of you all know 10 neighbors right now? So if you look around and see, most of us are still disconnected. And so the thing to do is to meet people where they are and have conversations and to hear about the issues that they have. We've built campaigns around making equitable trash fees. That is a political issue, right? But helping people understand first that you have power and you can move those local issues and then make the connection later to political. So everybody's not gonna come into this work ready to do political work. Some people are just gonna come because there's this really big hole in their yard, in their road that's been there for 5 years and it's never been fixed. And so that is the way that we bring people into the work, by asking them, what's keeping you up at night? What's stopping you from getting that change, and helping people make the connection and the dots. But I think in this moment, what I'm excited about is that across North Carolina, I see organizations and groups seeing that we need each other. We have to have each other's back. We have to work together, regardless of whether our theory of change is the same, regardless of whether our methods are the same. we all need each other. We're all on separate lanes in the highway, and hopefully we're all going the same way.
Walk together. Standing in front of the courthouse grounds at Alamance, where I met Dreama and where the incident occurred, my mind shifted in that moment to 1979, November the 3rd, where individuals were protesting the right to work, fair labor. And the police and the Klan conspired. An act of violence was committed. And instead of shuddering, the beloved community came together. And so to see now in 2020, just 30 years later, 30 some odd years later than that, 40 years later, no, I eagle, I hear the eagle trying to check me on my ear. We're still dealing with some of the same situations. And as a matter of fact, Reverend Nelson and Miss Joyce were one of the folks orchestrating behind the scenes trying to calm the waters then. And so this thing is historical and systemic. We can't just beat it with a voter registration card. And as a matter of fact, every single year we're putting new folks onto the voter registration rolls, and every year they're sending them back out of those voting rolls. And so I just want to make sure that we are understanding the solution is not just one-sided. It's not just going to be registering more folks to vote. We have more folks on the rolls now registered that are not turning out to vote. You could just turn out the people that are on the books and make history. And so I really just want us to get that. And that kind of shifts into this conversation with the organizations that are committed to doing just that, taking not just the folks that are on the rolls, but also engaging in this space. I want to start with Miles, because I think a lot of folks are wondering, how are the students ingesting this information? How are they do they really understand how important this election is? And what are some things that we can do to help? Miles, give us, from your perspective, because you've been on the campus now 4 years, right? And so you've seen movements. As a matter of fact, in Raleigh, there was a series of movements in the midst of the pandemic, and where a lot of students were engaged. And that protest, turning that into political action, has been one of your missions. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the campuses.
So I know that, like, right now, a lot of what you guys have said is kind of one of the main things I've been fighting for, like those porch politics conversations. More of those need to be had with the youth. I think it's one of those things where we have, my generation has kind of gotten this belief that, that's grown folk conversation. And I think that that's the main thing that I really want to paint a different picture of, because a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that's even being said in this room right now will go over a lot of my friends' heads. And it's not because of that's not because of the information, it's not because of the way you're saying it, it's because they don't understand it. The biggest election that I have ever seen, the biggest turnout for at my campus was when we elected Biden. It was when we elected Biden. That was the biggest turnout that we had got my entire college career. And it was mainly because we knew we were voting for the President of the United States of America. That was it. We knew we were voting for Joe Biden. We knew what he stood for and all that jazz. It was amazing. But then now that we're seeing municipal elections come up again, you don't see as much traction. You don't see pretty much anybody outside. And it's one of those things that people don't really understand what they do. They know that the president is the executive. The executive runs this, this, and this, and this, is responsible for this, this, and this. But when you don't know that your county commissioner is the reason that that hole is still in your street, when you don't know that the reason that we don't have the best infrastructure on campus is not because the school doesn't have the money, but it's because the city doesn't want to allocate funds to that area. When we talk about why most HBCUs are in the hood, sorry to be frank, but when we talk about that, that is because of your city officials, not because of the state, not because of the country. That's the city. That's the city's doing. I always use JCSU as a beautiful example, because Charlotte has literally just bundled them up. And that's what happens when you work together to elect your county officials. they are taken care of. I mean, have you been to their football field? They have a beautiful view of the skyline of Charlotte. But it's like, that's a beautiful example of what happens when you educate students about all of the process. I know that a lot of times, especially even being in conferences like this, there are some things that my elders don't want to tell me. And that's okay. It's not because, and it's not because they think I can't handle it. It's because they don't want me to. They feel that I shouldn't have to deal with these things. And that is 100% real. I feel it. I love that. But I can't fight this fight to the best of my ability if I don't have all the information, the way that you know the information. And I think that, the reason that those porch politics were so important, that's one thing we're doing. We're doing class raps, where we go in during this time and we just literally educate. Like, I'm teaching class, today's Wednesday, I'm teaching class next week on Monday about voter suppression. And we just kind of breaking it down on their level, having a real conversation, because, I'm young. I still think I'm grown, though. You know what I mean? And so because of that, when you're trying to break down information to where somebody can understand it, to you it may seem right, but to me you're condescending. You're trying to play me right now. That's the kind of examples I've always gotten. And then when it comes to what we're doing right now, it's mainly just trying to stay involved. And then when we get involved, how do we kind of keep up the flame with the pressure? How do we keep doing the work? Because I think a lot of times, especially as a student leader, I forget I'm a student, and I think this is my full-time job. And I think that's the main thing that students get really boggled down with. They start to think that, this is what I got to do full-time. I got to be here, here, and here. But then trying to remember, you are still a student, and then kind of navigating that line of navigating the line of disassociation and engagement. Those are the two things that I think students today are really struggling with. Knowing when to engage, not only in community, but in social community, but also knowing when to disengage. I know that some protests are for me, some protests are against me. But the thing about it is, if you don't have all the answers, you wouldn't know which ones was which. And that's the main thing that I'm trying to push with other students. And then it's a thing where you have to want to do it. You have to have some type of driving passion to help someone else. And knowing what you can give versus what they will give you has always been kind of my driving factor. And it's hard to paint that picture. You just have to kind of do it. I can't show you how to do it. I have to just do it with you. So that's one of the things that I'd say has kind of been my experience with working with students and things like that.
Do y'all think he was caught off guard on this panel? No. No. Leader of today. Thank you. That's very insightful for some of us that have not been in this college setting for a long time. And I think part of the nuance there is that we are thinking these strategies that we have to use to engage college students are different than when we have to engage in community. And Rev Steph can tell you some of the same tactics when we're talking about a class rap or a street rap. Those things are interchangeable. What are some of the things that Democracy North Carolina is doing to make all of this plain? Because we just went through a very tough battle with redistricting. The common individuals in America that are going to go vote in North Carolina, that are going to make their decisions, they're not going to know that their district is being changed. They're not going to know that you now have to carry a photo ID in order to go vote. We just did Souls to the Polls in Rowan County, and even some of the mega churches that have, 300, 400 members going to go march to the polls, half of those folks got turned away because they didn't have the ID. And some of them may not come back. And those are your active churches. Tell us about what DMSC is doing to kind of help in this space, educate, inform. And then I know you mentioned you have some groups in here that you're also supporting as well. Talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, so just to kind of to answer that second part or highlight that second part a little bit more, nonprofit voter engagement, this is a partnership that we have with a national organization called Nonprofit Vote. And of course, like I described earlier, they grant us a certain amount of money for us to then re-grant to organizations throughout the state of North Carolina that are already engaged with their communities. Notice I said already engaged with their communities, but not necessarily doing civic engagement. And I think that is an important thing to note because we like to sometimes, or it has been the case, where we like to come into communities, like we like to come into organizations, we're the content experts. So we think that what we have to say, what we have going on, the way that we have to say it is going to be most effective. But you know what's most effective? Relationship. We have to get back to relationship, and that is something that DMNC has been emphasizing. And so when we talk about partnering with nonprofit Vote, we're literally just utilizing what already exists, which is relationship. A healthcare collective or partnership in Western North Carolina and Asheville works with their population on a regular basis. That's a direct line of communication they have to make sure that those people are registered to vote, to make sure that those people know where their polling places are, to make sure that those folks not only know where their polling places are, but as Marcus is pointing out and highlighting, hey, you're gonna need photo ID. That is now the law of the land. And it actually, even something as simple as having someone fill out a pledge card, whether that is a physical pledge card that you have on paper if you're old school, or if you do it via your phone, if you have somebody pull out their phone or scan a QR code, filling out a pledge card, this is psychological. This is psychological. If I put my name to something, I'm more likely to do it. So if I say I'm going to vote, if I put down on paper that, yes, I'm going to vote in this 2023 municipal election, that does something psychologically that you just telling me, hey, there's a 2023 election going on, I hope you go out and vote. Yeah, sure, okay, whatever. Like that's something you can dismiss, but when I put my name to something, again, it's a psychological impact. So once again, we need to be emphasizing relationship. Miles, right?
Yes, sir.
So Miles is, don't call me sir. Oh, Lord Jesus.
It's just a thing.
I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. But no, but as Miles was talking about in terms of on the campuses, we were just having a conversation about that today with our organizing team. We have seen the need for folks to, we're going to be on college campuses. We're going to do what we're going to do on college campuses, but we don't realize, and a lot of our partner organizations, or a few of our partner organizations, actually do have fellows like Common Cause, which Miles is, but that's an understanding that Miles already has a relationship with his campus community. He already has a relationship with students. He already has a relationship with the faculty. He already has relationships with administrators, especially if he's been a student leader on campus for many years. So that is what we are to be utilizing, is relationship, and not just, hey, we have this information, let's send this information out, let's share this information. So that is the biggest thing that I think we can do. And then just to kind of, I guess, piggyback in a sense off of that, or to dovetail off of that, I think that not only relationship, but also you really have to be quite honest. I appreciated what y'all were talking about in terms of being honest. Why would we be silent in the face of all that's going on? Why would we not be honest about what's happening? Especially as it connects to history. I remember telling someone that we like to talk about history as being the past, but the past is the present. You don't have a present without what we quote unquote call the past. It informs where we are now. And if we're not careful, our past will be our future. And so that is something that we need to be emphasizing against, telling the truth, making it plain. I know you talked about, it can kind of be, for some, ways some people approach might be condescending, but I believe, I'm a preacher, so I believe in making it plain.
Yes, sir.
You make it plain. And so I had an op-ed that was released today in the Charlotte Observer where I just make it plain, like, the fear of democracy is reviving Jim Crow strategies throughout North Carolina. We don't have to hide. We don't have to hide that. We don't have to be silent about that. That's real. That's the reality. And so again, if we're not careful, our past will be our future. So talk about it, make it plain, and focus on relationship. Those are the biggest things.
Thank you, Reverend. Mic drop moment right there. Talking about relationship, one of the things that's important in relationship is relevancy, right? We are here in this space that has been carved out over the past 50 years because it is just as relevant now as it was when it was started in the 80s. In 80s or 90s, correct me if I'm wrong. Beloved, yes. In 91. It's just as relevant today. And League of Women Voters has that exact same relevancy. As a matter of fact, for an organization to have such a historic legacy, you all are not resting on that legacy. The League of Women Voters and several other groups, Black Alliances One, just launched a lawsuit against the state of North Carolina around same-day registration. And yes, very big, historic. So Gary, if not necessarily about that in particular, that case, because I know you may not be able to discuss being a plaintiff there, but how is it that League of Women Voters has intentionally sought out to be relevant when so many organizations, you just kind of rest on their laurels?
Well, thank you. The League was formed by a number of suffragettes who worked to get women the right to vote in 1920. And once they did that, they recognized immediately that people had to have good information. So they, and I think, Marcus, you said it, if they don't have the right information, then their votes are maybe misguided or at least based on bad information. So that's been the League legacy. We have trouble. We're a nonpartisan organization. We have to be so in order to register people to vote. The League has always done candidate forums, but I have to tell people, it doesn't mean we're non-political. The local league, we have these various roundtables that work on immigration issues, criminal justice issues, education issues, environmental issues. So we try to provide information that people can use. But I'll also say, hits close to home when you talk about being condescending, when you're the white professor teaching a course called Race, Media, and Politics. The first issue we have to deal with is the cultural one. But I tell them after a very short time, the main gap in our classroom isn't going to be race. It's going to be age. That these devices, I think, are not good organizing tools. Or put it this way, they're bad information tools. They can be used to organize, but I had a lot of students who were beginning to have second thoughts about their social media use and saw that, and then the pandemic happened, and that they didn't have anything else. So I think, it's a real difficult situation I think the students are facing, but my research right now is about misinformation and disinformation. And these are misinformation, disinformation machines. That's what they're designed to do. They're designed to present things that get people, conspiracy theories and lies are the basis of what they do. There's good information here. Go to the Common Cause site or go to the League of Women Voters site. It's there, but that's not where the most traffic is going. Most of the traffic is going to the conspiracy theories and the lies. Which is, Trump doesn't deserve credit for using Twitter. Twitter was designed for people like Trump. So I think that's, talking about painting the picture as it is, this is a big problem we have. And then another one is that, people mentioned the Wilmington coup. The current maps that are going to be used for the next election, unless the lawsuits that are being filed are successful, it's a coup. It's a coup of a different kind. But democracy is done. I mean, to say that North Carolina is a democratic state, even though we're quite evenly divided, it's always been a purple state, the fact is that if these maps go, we are locked in as a deep red state for the foreseeable future. So these are difficult truths to convey, and the classroom is great for me because I have to try to temper my anger and figure out how to convey to students, to convey my anger, but to try to reach them where they are and develop those relationships. And over the course of a semester, at least, I'm able to do that a little bit on the small scale. My students like me better at the end than they do at the beginning. But anyway, thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause for a very exciting first round. You all stick with us because this second round we're going to go a little deeper. Can we go a little deeper? Don't leave us now. We're going to go a little deeper. Paul, we're going to take it there. Serena, you mentioned something at the start of your comments that I think we cannot just glaze over. We are here for truth, justice, and reconciliation. I know that there is a lot of reasons why we are unable to reconcile. When we talk about the land that was taken from the indigenous people of this land, of America, when we talk about that struggle of being able to provide reparations for people that were once considered, chattel. And when we talk about this current conflict, it has political implications right here in North Carolina. As a matter of fact, Governor Roy Cooper was in Japan about 2 weeks ago. And in the middle of his trip out of the country, the lieutenant governor decided to hold a press conference at the state capitol to talk about specifically the conflict in Northern Africa and the Middle East. Now, immediately, I think there is a lot of conversation, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that just like the conflict in America, the conflict internationally is just as difficult to talk about, but it has some of the same origin story as what we're dealing with here. And I'm not of the opinion of choosing any side but the people's side. And the people are getting hurt over there and over here. And so, Serena, why is it important when we talk about voter engagement in 2024 that we start tackling some of these difficult things now? And what are some ways that you found have been helpful for us to broach the conversation? Now, understanding that the common voter may not even want to talk about this issue, and we're not suggesting that everybody go out here knocking on doors, talking about conflicts far away from us, but how does that relate to conflicts that are right here in our own front yard?
Thanks, Marcus. I also think I want to go back just a little bit to what happened after January 6th to begin. January 6th was also profoundly important for North Carolina in ways that we don't always talk about. We, in the course of doing that research that I mentioned earlier, found 9 busloads of North Carolinians went up to DC to participate in the violent overthrow of our democracy, of our governance. And those 9 busloads didn't stay in DC. They came back down. They continued to organize, and they organized in very granular ways in our counties, at our school boards. We've talked about Wilmington, about what's happened in 1898. But last year, I was in Wilmington at a school board meeting where the Proud Boys stood across the back of the room and were permitted by this body to disrupt a hearing about whether middle school children could participate in sports based on their gender. I mean, this is a militia of every bit as dangerous as the one that massacred Black people in Wilmington in 1898. Those are the roots here in North Carolina. We also think about other things that have happened just recently. At the end of last year, we saw an act of domestic terrorism in Moore County, when a power station was taken out amidst a community controversy about a drag show taking place. People who opposed that drag show later took credit for taking out power to 45,000 households in the middle of winter. I didn't say 45,000 people, I said households. So multiply that by 3 or 4 and you get some sense of what was lost over 5 days in the middle of winter. When the power goes out, we now understand even better, watching what's happening in the Middle East, what humanitarian crisis is created when we remove that kind of infrastructure. As soon as the power went out, the street lights went out. Who was there to direct public safety? Who was there to provide food when people's food had gone bad in refrigerators over 2 or 3 days? More recently, one of the people who died in that time, their death was named a homicide. Political violence is no stranger to North Carolina, not in the past and not right now. Right. So I think the imperative, as we've been talking about, is in naming that so that we can call for what does democracy really look like, so that we can call for courage. And that is the opportunity, but only if we name the actual problem. I think it's really important that we also name where you started with a man who is a very mediocre lieutenant governor currently. Because that race next year for governor in North Carolina is set to be the most watched in the country. So if we are concerned about those 9 busloads that went up and came back down, well, they got friends in other places that are going to be watching this too. And the results of that election will determine things like our access to abortion, our children's basic education, the integrity of our governance for generations to come hang in the balance. And so this is a time when relationships make possible collective courage, and we need it now more than ever.
Wow. Wow. And Serena, nobody left the room. We are still here. We're still united. And that's a perfect example of what we have to do in this struggle if we're going to walk together. When you walk together, some toes may get stepped on, but it's not intentional. And what we have to do is make sure we're not taking these things that are coming from our friendly fire as friendly fire. We have to take it and figure out how to learn with it and grow with it. So thank you very much. There is another difficult subject that I think we want to broach when we talk about civic engagement. There are certain spaces in North Carolina that still don't believe in the possibility of the amazing women leadership. We are coming out of a situation where in 2022, you had the smartest black women in our political system running for Senate, running for congressional races, and they lost based on fear, right? We could talk about it after the fact because we have to be nonpartisan in the middle of the election. Election over. We could talk about it. This same notion in certain places keeps women from being on the pulpit in churches. And if we're not careful, that same notion is going to drag us back in a place where we cannot afford to go back. Dreama, you took what could have been considered what the young folks call an L and made a W, a slam dunk that is opening doors for many other women behind you. I think about Diamond Stanton Williams, who made history in Cabarrus County by being elected to the state house. And in direct response to that, what are they doing? They're drawing her district away. But still, we rise. Talk a little bit about, you talked about your experience from the down home perspective. What does this mean in this moment to be fighting for the next group of women leaders, not just women of color, but women of all stripes that are trying to get into elected office, and in particular, those that have been most marginalized, black women in elected office?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. I think that one of the things we have to remember is that whether we give people credit or not, women are the backbone of our society. They are the working class. They are people who are holding our homes together. And so women, it's just robbery not to include us in this process, into political process. I think the thing that we have to be honest about is that we have great candidates. We get great women candidates. Women are outraised in fundraising, and so they don't get the same backing. Women are bashed a little bit differently when we run for office. And so in this moment, as we are talking about maps and looking at things, there are going to be places where we're going to ask women to step up and run for office. And there are going to be places that we're going to want women to take the lead. But what has to happen is that there has to be people behind their back. There were safety threats to myself, which are the reason why I live in Greensboro and not in Alamance County, because I had to move. With police who tell you they don't provide personal security. So who's keeping her safe is a question that we need to ask. Who's supporting her? Who's keeping her safe? I cannot talk about safety enough as we ask working class people to run for office, that their safety sometimes is at risk. When you shift the narratives in places, it puts people safety at risk. And so I think in this moment that we have to really have real conversations about how do we keep folks safe, not just in political movements, but people who are working in the movement at all. How do we keep people safe? We know that the Moms of Liberty have been organizing. We know that people on the right have been organizing. And they're not people who always maybe value women, but they understand this moment and understand. And so they're training women. They're training women to run. They're training women to lead. And we have to do the same thing. We have to train women to run for office, to run campaigns, to run on boards and commissions. It's not the same if we're not a part of the process. And so I think that that's important in this moment to uplift our leadership.
Let's do a room check. How many folks do we have from the 336 area code? Let me just see by show of hands. All right. How about 919? All right. How about 910? Okay. How about 252? All right. No 25? Okay. All right. How about 704? All right. 803? Did I miss anybody? Okay. 828. Can't forget the great 828 in the West. Now listen, we have representation from all over the state here. And so this is really the front porch of North Carolina in this conversation. And in a real way, I think North Carolina has shifted very quickly since the 2008 election when I was in college to the election that Miles described in the election of President Biden. But not much has changed in how we are engaging. One thing that was mentioned at the top when we first started this session, or this the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation convening, is the fact of how are we going to leave from here doing something different, or how are we going to leave from here informed by different strategies? Let's talk about some of the more different things that we should be and could be doing to engage our people. And in that, how can we use this togetherness, right? A lot of times folks feel like they have to pick one horse. I got to, be with Democracy North Carolina or with Blueprint or with Down Home or with, but we all are working together. This proof positive. And we're all going to need to work together when we walk across this state with Beloved in this commission. And so talk to us about the innovation in democracy. What are you excited about? I know technology is fearful. We got AI coming into play, and that's going to add to the disinformation and misinformation. So if you don't want to talk about some innovations, talk about what you're fearful of going into 2024 so we can use that as we build consensus for the next steps. And we'll start with Gary.
Yeah, fear. Yeah, that's my subject. Well, first, I want to. No one's mentioned public schools or that the battle is going on there. That's we're talking about civics. Not only was that a place where civics used to be taught, but even when it stopped being taught, it was where it was lived. That's where everyone went to the public school and met people that weren't necessarily like them and learned a process and learned sometimes to wait in line and wait their turn. Anyway, so right now the public schools, anything that's public is under assault. Whether it's the post office or the schools, or the public transportation, it's all under assault because public means everybody. Public means democracy. So anything that everyone can do is under assault right now. So I think we can't all be in all these places at once. We can't all, we have limited bandwidth but we have to let these other organizations know we support them. And I think, Dreama is saying that we have to have people's back, even if, my son grew up going to meetings every night because that's what I felt compelled to do. Okay, I can't do that anymore, but I try to let people know and try to let, League of Women Voters Group, different organizations know so that we can support each other, walk towards each other, as Reverend Johnson would say. So I don't know what to do with the fear except we have to use it. We can't pretend it isn't there. We can't tell young people, protect our younger people from it. but we have to guide them as best we can, not let it get the best of us. I struggle with that. But to talk to them, to let them know this is real, we know you can't keep the pain out. You got to take it and use it.
You can't take the pain out. You got to take it and use it. Taking notes, Gary. You do all right now. You're doing something over there, brother. All right. Who's next?
Well, okay. I know that I'm really prepared for the annual talk that we have with students. Every election year, every election cycle, it's like it's kind of done subconsciously at this point, but it's that thing where we got to get students involved. Come on out, get here. You got that. And I think that this year, I feel like that talk is going to be a little bit different because you're starting to see that young people are also starting to educate themselves a lot more than they used to come probably 2020, honestly. Because there's a need for it now. There always was. But, now especially you see that the younger people are starting to educate themselves because they're starting to get a mind of their own. They're starting to see things that they don't like themselves. So I'm happy and I'm excited to see the engagement. But I do know my biggest fear, however, when it comes to elections is hearing that, well, not really a fear, but what breaks my heart is when I hear that one student that says, why does this matter? Because that means, and that tells me that you obviously have not educated yourself. You haven't spoken to the right people, and then no one is speaking to you. And if no one's speaking to you, that means that no one's giving you ideas. And if you don't have any ideas of where you want to be in the future, then where's our future? And so that's one of the things that I guess you can say is my biggest fear. Is I just want to make sure that every student who wants to be engaged is involved, and every student who wants to be involved is still engaged. So yeah, that's good for me.
Thank you very much. Rep. Steph?
Yeah, just real quick. One of the things with Democracy North Carolina is, one of our core values anyway, is community-based leadership. And I think that as I've kind of emphasized in my previous statements, that is probably our biggest thing. But how do we do that, especially in a post-COVID shutdown world, not a post-pandemic, but a post-COVID shutdown world where so many things have changed, people's priorities have shifted, even the ways that people seek to communicate has shifted. How many people knew what Zoom was before COVID? Yeah, that's not even a fifth of the room. And so again, there is, how do we? One of the things that it's a stream of thought or a school of thought in a completely different, not a completely different, but in a different with a different tilt is this idea of traditioned innovation. So how do we keep and how do we hold on to the things that have got us to this point, have gotten us over, as they say in the old church. How have we gotten, what are the things that are absolutely that we need to hold on to? And then what are the things that we just doing because we've always done it? And so those are the things that need to be innovated. And so when we talk about innovation, that is, I think, the kind of model that we need to have. The things that, it sounds very basic, but sometimes the best answers are the most basic things. This is X. We do it because of Y to get the result Z. And I think we need to kind of get back to that in terms of, we can't just keep doing things just to do it, or because we have done it, or because we're comfortable doing it. Comfortability is the enemy. And so whenever we get comfortable, whenever we get content and rest on our laurels, I guess you can say, we're in trouble. And so we cannot be in a mode of resting on our laurels. And then I think we also have to be looking at, this is gonna be real. I have observed, Marcus, and I don't know if this is something that you have observed, but I think in a lot of particularly over the past 25, 30 years, and a lot of our quote unquote progressive organizations and progressive-minded schools of thought and progressive movements, we kind of have moved more into this almost like academic elitism. And
Break it down, Real.
That might be a little ironic coming from somebody.
We got time. Break it down.
Okay. That might be, even I might not even be the best messenger for that, as I am literally set to get a doctorate from Duke in a few months. So it's, I may not be the best person or the best representative to that, but this is something I have observed. And so when we talk about, why are black men not voting? I know that's something you had mentioned earlier, and we said we didn't really want to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. A lot of that comes down to this, or I have theorized that a lot of that comes down to this kind of academic elitism we have in these progressive spaces that we are in. And when you think about it, black men have been, if 1 in 3, I think Brian Stevenson, that is research that he has done with the Equal Justice Initiative. Brian Stevenson says 1 in 3 African American males specifically, but in general, will have an encounter with the criminal justice system, whether that's being in jail, whether that's being in prison, you've been sentenced, you're in prison, whether that's on some type of probation, you will experience the criminal justice system. And we know what that does. That locks people out of educational opportunities. That locks people out of jobs. That locks people out of voting, this thing that we're talking about right now. So again, I think we have to reframe our discussion and also reframe the way that our how can I put this? What's the best word? Our orientation, our disposition. We have to reframe our orientation towards communities and not just say, black men aren't voting. Well, there's a reason black men aren't voting, so let's address that. And I'm not pretending like I have all the solutions, but I'm saying, like, let's address that. Let's focus on that. If you're also going to call people out for not voting or voting for someone like Trump when given a decision between Trump and Biden or something like that. So again, that's something we need to look at as well. So
it makes me think, oftentimes we try to lead with the stick instead of the carrot. So when we're talking to folks that aren't voting, we'll say, man, why don't you go vote? That's a shame. They're going to take your vote away if you don't hurry up and do this. Don't you want this, that, and the third? Instead of really acknowledging the fact that they are passing laws, not because you're not voting, but because you are voting in record number. And in order to make sure that we don't stop that power, we need you to do it one more time. Not a browbeaten type of message, but an encouraging message that brings people in. I think that your remarks really make me think of that. I don't want to lose the comments that may come from Serena as well. So Serena, I'll turn it to you and then to Dreama.
So I think one thing we haven't talked about here yet is the reality that no people in history have ever voted their way into freedom. Woo.
Told y'all round two.
No, that it simply is. It is a necessary but insufficient strategy for changing the fundamental social conditions that we live in. In addition to the vote, we also have to mobilize. We also have to hold our elected officials accountable. It's only one side to say we should vote. And who should we vote for? Because it's actually quite easy for me to be nonpartisan. As someone whose people have not been served consistently by any existing political party. And sometimes we have to be willing to make the same kind of outreach and ask the same kinds of hard questions about poor people's issues, about rural issues, about LGBTQ issues, that mainstream issues get all the time. And when our issues are not weighed by our elected officials, when our will is not represented, we have to take to the streets. Why? Because else, why would they listen to us? Why would our votes mean anything other than an entry into a front door? The only way is to not just vote, but to mobilize. And to do that, we have to appeal to what brings people out into the streets, and that is vision. It's hope for a different future. It's hope for a future where actually your address doesn't determine how much your vote counts. It's hope for a future where we are each other's keepers. That's what makes me want to come out of my house, and not just to vote, but every day to say, hey, you said you would do this for us. And did you do that? No, well then we're going to come to your office and we're going to ask some hard questions. What do we get for our vote? That is how we change the game.
Ms. Risha, that's what the young folk call pull up. We're going to pull up on you.
Yeah.
Dreama.
Yeah, I think one of the things is I don't know that we sit enough time with people who aren't voting and just listen. Actually, one of the things I did as a candidate is I held a town hall for people who hadn't voted in the last 5 years, had some food, and just listened. And I heard things like, I don't even understand what's happening. I had civics in 5th grade. Or, I voted before and my life hasn't changed. And then there were people who thought they were permanently disenfranchised because of an old felony, because there was no one out on the streets telling them that's not true, you can still vote. And so I think spending time with people who don't vote. Another thing that you'll hear when you spend time with people who don't vote, they're tired of us showing up at their house and at their church during election time and then don't come back until election time again. They're tired of it. And so civic engagement is a year-round process. It does not show up just at election time. It's what you do off election time as well. So part of what we have to do is to slow down, not blame and shame people because they're not voting, and find out why, and walk them through that process of hearing why they're not voting. It is easy to think that someone just doesn't care. And so helping people understand that, like, you don't have to do politics, but it's gonna do you, whether you do it or not. The decisions are gonna be made in your community, whether you are there or whether you are not there. And helping people understand why things like doing the census is important to our community. Finding all of those things, of just taking time and sitting with people. And there's this other thing of like, that we're not talking about, right? We're not talking about class. This is something that has been used to divide us. We have, as a black woman, I have more in common with a poor white person than not. But the powers that be have made it to where we don't interact with one another and we don't connect with one another. And so we just have to be really real about those things. We all sit here and we say we live an anti-racist life, and then I'll ask you, when's the last time you had somebody who didn't look like you at your house for dinner? When is the last time that you visited someone's house that's across difference? So we have to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, and that means sometimes sitting with folks who don't feel like we feel and helping them get to that point.
Awesome. And I don't think we need to leave this part of mobilizing without recognizing two of the hardest, best mobilizers and organizers. One was in the room, I may have missed him, Rob, and then April Parker is in the back too. Just want to recognize them for their work and moving community through protest and politics, because it's a both and, as well as all the other amazing folks. I see some people from Eastern North Carolina that have been raising sand with Serena, trying to fight back against this military operation installation in their backyard, and they have been putting up that fight for at least the past 2 or 3 years, and that's what we need, you all. If we just come to people one time a year and ask them to do something, we're engaging in a transaction. But I think we are here for a transformation. Yes. And so I'm very excited about the conversation that have happened, our fears and our opportunities and our innovations. Before we go to the audience for questions, and I know there's at least 1 or 2 questions because I've been getting some messages here. When we do this right, when we work together, there is a real vision of what we can create. And the issues that we are oftentimes so plagued in weigh us down. And so I really want you all to think about, if we do everything we are supposed to do in 2024 to educate, to turn out, to mobilize, to even pull up if we got to, what will things look like on the other side of this if this whole entire room takes this march from today to Saturday across the state? What will it look like as we continue to push from the March primary all the way to the November election? What is it we want to create? What do we want to see? Miles, I'm going to go to you last. I want to start, let's start from our left and go all the way to our right.
I think, so I believe that we need to elect working class people everywhere for every office, all up and down the ballot. And so we have people down ballot that are gonna run that, we all pay attention to the presidential race, but there's some down ballot things that are really gonna make a difference. Just an example, in Watauga, we are going to have 3 members that are going to be elected to office. They are unchallenged there. And because we're going to have the majority on the board, we are able to do some projects around the IRA funds because we have people who are willing to work with us. So
hold on one second. Does everybody know what IRA is? Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act. I want you to write that down and then write down the Justice 40 Initiative. Inflation Reduction Act, Justice 40. And that's similar to what was considered the American Rescue Plan Act, but it's slightly different. Go ahead, Dreama.
Yeah, it's actually going to bring trillions of dollars into our country. And for me, I haven't seen anything like this. It's comparable to the New Deal for me, for what the ability to transform our communities are. This money is coming to our counties whether we're here or not. And so being aware and knowing what's coming into our counties. I think if we are successful in winning in 2024 and breaking a supermajority and holding the governor's house, hopefully we're able to put money back into public education that has been taken away. Everybody was very upset about defunding the police, and nobody cares that we've been defunding education for years. And so I hope that at the end of 2024 that we find a way to be able to put money back into our public schools. But what I really hope is that people understand that the vote that they gave in 2024 is not the end, it's actually the beginning of a process. And that they understand that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires participation, and it is year-round participation, even once the polls close.
I think that as we imagine what is possible, acknowledging the impact of a presidential election year is also important. You know, there are elections that happen every year, but every 4 years we see a pattern that's very particular that plays out. And I think there's a lot at stake for us and a lot that we could make possible, but only if we are also visioning towards 2025. And I think that we have a chance to do something very powerful this year, because for too long in presidential election years, our priorities, the priorities of the people in this room, the priorities of Black communities, of LGBTQ people, of working class people, of rural people, don't make it to the front of the line. And I think that can change. That can change if we make it so, and if we work together to make that real. But too often, presidential years actually bring a lot of national organizations that would rather parachute in than collaborate with the local leadership that's been holding it down for the other 3 years of that cycle. Too often, the money that flows in a presidential election year is gone the next, and then we have to start all over again every 4 years. And too often, we really don't have a chance to build the infrastructure, the lasting collective power that it would take for a real transformation to occur, because we allow a narrative about North Carolina and also about the South to persist that does not actually serve our best interests. We talk sometimes some lip service towards a new South, that we need to bring about a new South. But our people are still stepping over coffins in order to vote. We talk about a new South, but we see the same patterns of inequality across black belts, not just in North Carolina, but in the 13 states of the former slave-holding Confederacy. And we also see that good old-fashioned racial terror as a political strategy persists today when we try to distance ourselves from where we have come from. This idea of a new South is not real. But we can make real transformation. And only if we begin to challenge that narrative by also actually speaking the names of our hometown heroes and lifting up our people who are actually embodying and visioning democracy in 100 counties of North Carolina. I'm so glad that Christina Davis McCoy's name and work has been lifted up, because every time I think about what is possible, I think about leadership like yours in Hoke County. I think about Chester Williams. I think about Risa Willis. I think about the people in this room who embody the values, the experiences, and the perspectives that might not create a new South, but can create a very real new day in an old South. And it's only possible when we collectively roll up our sleeves and put our hands to the freedom plow.
Fellas, the ladies got us here. They got us here now. Don't take us down. Keep us going up now. All right, Rev.
So what does it look like 2024? We do everything right, yada, yada, yada. People, yeah, all of that good stuff. It looks like a redefinition of power. And what I mean by that is that power has like it's like has a dirty connotation. It's like a dirty word, or at least I have experienced that. Like when you talk about power, people cringe up, people, start to look at you funny, but power in and of itself is not a bad thing. Just like anything else, the way it's used determines whether it's quote unquote good or quote unquote bad. And so in answering this question, for me, it is power. It is power being restored to the people. Right. All the power to all the people. That is what that looks like. And so power is not a dirty thing. Power is something for us to use so that all North Carolinians, like she said, may not be a new South, but so that at least all North Carolinians can begin to see the fruits of equality, equity, and justice. Every North Carolinian, not just reserved for the few, not just reserved for those who can afford it, not just reserved for those who look a certain way, not just reserved for those in a certain zip code, not just reserved for those on the mountains, not just reserved for those on the coast, not just reserved for those in Charlotte, not just reserved for those in these big urban areas, not just reserved for those who are in the eastern parts, who are in rural areas, all North Carolinians. All the power to all the people. That is what it looks like on the other side of 2024 when we do everything right. Let us take back power, because the power belongs to us, not to those who want to misuse and abuse it.
Somebody say, all power to the people. All power to the people. Oh, y'all don't mean it. All power to the people.
All power to the people.
All right, my brother. Come on, Aggie brother. Let's go.
Well, the way my recent work connects to this is to say that the illusion of power that we get through our media is very powerful. And I recommend, there's a book called Team Human. Mm-hmm. And that's, that those conversations that Dreama is talking about that we have to have with people. Be with people. Don't fall for the fact that because you are on a listserv with a group that is pushing the ball forward. Yes, real communication takes place online, but that's not where the meaningful change is going to take place. The relationships have to be developed. We can only do that face to face.
Gary, I got one more question for you. In 2020, a lot of the black community, whenever we saw white organizers in community, we said, the white community should be responsible for talking to their people about Donald Trump. Now, in 2024, there is a Republican candidate for governor that is a black man. Chickens meet roost. This is not just a male problem, but this is a problem that is very, when you talk about miscommunication, disinformation, I'm trying to keep it nonpartisan, Rev. I'm trying to do this the right way. How do we make sure that folks are not blinded by the physical appearance of what they may imagine and not the political actualization of what we need? Did I do that, First Lady? Okay, all right.
I'm not sure. I've been telling, for decades, I've said the Democratic Party is not going to save the Republic. The Republican Party has to do it. In other words, the Republican Party is now at war with itself, but they don't believe in government. They don't believe in the Constitution. That battle has, again, the conversations Dreama is talking about, to engage people in conversation that aren't in your tribe, are really essential, and it means, and I'm, as guilty of this as anyone, not availing myself of every opportunity I have, or when I am engaging with someone disagreeing, attacking rather than listening, and so sure that I'm on the side of the angels. So that engagement is really important, and especially with the people who are coming at it from a 180-degree different point of view.
You did good, Gary. You did good. I'm taking notes. Miles.
I would say coming up that more working class elected officials is what we need. I know that over the summer I interned at the General Assembly of North Carolina, and what I saw was, now this may be a little controversial, but it's one of those things where I was able to have regular conversations with very important Republican leaders. But then at the same time, I almost felt nervous I didn't have a tie on when I talked to just regular Democratic officials. You know what I mean? And right. But it's one of those things where, having that conversation, like she said, is so important because, after that conversation, I understand that yes, we may not agree on anything that come politically. But you're still a human, just like me. This morning when you got out of the car, you ripped your pants. I did too. You know what I mean? Having those types of conversations, being real with one another, I think is kind of the biggest thing. And that goes back to what I was saying about having those real conversations with young people. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying you're dumbing things down too much. I'm saying it's simply, I just want to feel like I'm talking to another human, not someone of authority. I think, and that's another thing that we have to kind of make sure that we're not sensitive with, but we're mindful of, is that a lot of young people, especially today, have only ever seen authority when it is trying to be an authoritative figure, when it is trying to impose or enforce itself on that young person. That's the reality of the situation. So then when you bring in why most young people today don't respect authority, there you go. When you bring in today while most young people don't state their ideas, even though they're very bright, that's because from a long time they were told it's okay, it's not your fight, let it go, And I think now we're starting to see that shift, like, okay, well, since you don't want to fight, since you don't want to fight for the things I want you to fight for, and I think that's what it really is. We are agitated and irritated the fact that for years, we have been placed and propped up into positions where we get to speak on behalf of our universities, on behalf of our organizations. However, what we're speaking about has nothing to do with me. Or I feel like it has nothing to do with me, or it's not the thing I want to be talking about. And I know, like, working in the General Assembly, like I said earlier, it's one of those things where a lot of the Democratic reps, a lot of them were lawyers, business owners, owned Fortune 500 companies. I know this one Except Ray Jeffs, I love that guy. But and then you have those types of people. But then you have on the Republican side, I know I cannot Representative cannot think of his name right now, but he's an auto mechanic. He owns a mechanic back home in his district. And so when he's not wearing his three-piece suit on TV, he goes right back to his district and he's changing people's tires. It's that type of strategy that I think that we kind of have to look at, because you can't really tell me that man still want to be changing tires after he go and deal with a $40 million budget. You can't tell me that. He want to do something a little bit more. But the strategy is that I'm getting to know these people just by doing and giving them a service. I may not be able to give them everything they want in their county, but at least I can change their tire. At least I can give them good service while I'm doing that. So then you're building that type of relationship. And I think as long as we're being mindful of what type of relationships we're building, and then it's a thing like what you said with the elitism. That is a type of vibe a lot of people get when it comes to voting, because the most educated people know the most about voting. But yet when you try and tell your friends, hey, you really need to come to the polls. Why? You don't really have a whole lot of answers, but besides, you need to. You want me to vote for you? I can't do that. It's illegal. But yet they need actual tangible answers. They need physical answers as to why I need to be there. It can't just be a thing, well, my mom's always had me vote, so I've always wanted to vote, and I want you to vote. No, that's not good enough. I need answers. I need to know why. I need to know why. What is this bill, Senate Bill 90? What does that actually do to me? How does that actually affect me? How does Senate Bill 744 actually affect me? You just telling me that it's bad for me means nothing. So that, I guess, having real conversations, like everybody pretty much has already said. So yeah, those are some things I'm looking forward to.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of our panelists. We have time for about maybe 2-3 questions. Yes, ma'am. I think in order to pick up the sound for the recording, they want you to go to the mic. Aren't we so glad this conversation is recorded? We can go back and look at this and study this. This is great. This whole entire day, all 3 days are recorded. This is awesome. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Paula Quickhall from the African American Education and Research Organization at Melker Quick Meeting House. And I have 2 things. One is I've done workshops with college students where the theme is who represents you. And I walk them through a process because I think a lot of people don't vote because they don't know who they want to vote for when they see 10 people on a ballot. So we take sample ballots and help people do the research to know what difference it makes which person they choose based on their own values. The other thing I want to mention is there a place, all the organizations that are here have handouts, written materials. Is there a way, if you're trying to share the same information with different audiences, that there's a repository that some of the more efficient tools could be used so that the organizations could tweak the items in ways that represent their perspectives, but the facts, the truths are shared and produced efficiently?
I see someone feverishly writing to my left and taking notes. Serena, I don't know if you want to comment. I don't know if there's a specific answer.
Not yet, but I think that that's a really good idea and something that we can certainly try to compile from the organizations that are represented on this panel as a first step. Thank you for that.
And we can make sure whenever that tool or whenever that technology is produced, if it's a guidance or a one-pager with all the different information, we'll send it out to Beloved, and they can send it out to the rest of the group. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sylvia Clapp-White, and I'm on the board with Beloved, but that's not why I'm standing here. I want to thank you all for being here. I have enjoyed it so much, and I'm just excited for the work that you're doing. But I did have a question, and it goes to Mr. Kenton, and it goes back to when I first returned to North Carolina. I think it was the 2016 election, and the League of Women Voters was hosting some lunches, and they had invited the candidates in, and there was a policy that only if you as a candidate could not speak if your opponent was not there. Is that still happening?
It is. What we do is, because we work hard, even though people don't believe us, we work hard to protect that nonpartisan basis. So yes, if one candidate doesn't show up, and I'm happy to say we've sort of turned a corner. For a few years, a lot of Republicans were saying, no, the League of Voters, they filed these lawsuits, they're not nonpartisan. They were told by their leadership not to come to our events. I think we've turned a corner, so few are doing that. But yes, if one party doesn't show up, we don't hold that debate. What we do is the candidate that does show up can stay and then be involved with Q&A and one-on-one with people. But yeah, believe me, that's been a tough debate within the league.
Yeah, I thought that was a very bad decision, and because that year, I'm going to talk about him because he is running for office now, but he was running for senator in he was running for the House, Mark Walker. There was another young candidate running against him, and it was one of those situations, but Mark Walker wasn't the only one. I think Tom Tillis did the same thing. They didn't show up, so their opponent was never heard, and they had some great opponents. So I hope y'all will revisit that because they should have had a voice, because, you know, Mark Walker walked into that, and he didn't feel challenged.
Thank you. All I can say is I'll run it up the flagpole again. But I will say I think we're going to strengthen the presence. If a candidate's there, the opponent isn't, we'll strengthen the message that that person is there and available for discussion. But
that you didn't let their voice be.
That's LWVUS. That goes up the chain, and so far their answer has been no. We're going to strictly abide by this. But thank you.
And lastly, because I lived in Texas for so long and I was in a Republican stronghold, one thing that the Republican candidate did, came into the area and they had coffee at the local library. So when you talk about we vote, but we never see them until it's time to vote again. And he made it a point to say, if you need me, call me. So everybody, you know, came, told him what they needed. He looked out for them. We don't get that same respect sometimes, but thank you. And you did miss the Aggies that were here earlier.
I don't think I did.
No, there was a group you said you wanted to see more young people.
Oh, my bad.
They were in the
Sounds
house,
good.
smart
I'm
Aggies.
sorry.
Okay,
I'm
Aggie
sorry.
pride.
That was my bad.
Caught yourself, but they're smart Aggies, better than I am. I think, is there one more? I do want to make sure we get this question, please. Yes. Oh, no. I'll go, no stop.
Hey, y'all. Forgive me, I'm trying to see the names on these pages. I don't want to disrespect y'all. Okay. So my questions are technically targeted towards the people that brought up, like, the subject, but it's also intersectional. So follow me, y'all. Just follow me, y'all. I'm one of those type of questions. Okay, follow me, y'all. So, what's your name?
Me?
Yes.
Miles.
Okay. So when you talked about elders not answering our questions, I also talked about this with my own community. And I've also had the theory of, I call like passing the torch, but nothing is lit at all. Because what are you passing? And I'm being for real, because we all know that I know, like, my generation of Gen Zers like to say we have like the most radical brain and theories, even more than our ancestors and elders did. But to be honest, if you're a nerd like me and you start researching elders and ancestors, especially in the Black community, like, you'll see they said the same thing that we're saying. Like, for example, Zora Neale Hurston and the trend of with African spirituality. She then said that. So I think my question is more of like an expanding statement, because it also goes into the intersectionality question of when you talked about relationships. And I'm a person that loves to deconstruct. Like, I remember Tamika Mallory said, everybody can't go. But see, I disagree. I am y'all don't cancel me, but I am a person that believes in some type of utopia. I do believe we can eradicate this world, because what are we fighting for? Like, I feel like all of you guys are wasting your time if you don't believe something can't be eradicated, because I'm not going to sit on a panel talking about some abolition, and I don't believe in abolition in the near future. So how do we tell our elders that you're passing a torch and it's not lit, and you're kind of coattailing on our progressiveness, right? Like, you're not progressive, you just have to stay relevant, and you're trying to coattail on what we are saying, if that makes sense. But also, how do we keep those relationships, right? How do we make sure that if we bring, and I'm gonna drop names, that's who I am. So say for a conversation, for example, how do we bring in Farrakhan, but then how do we also bring in Angela Davis at the same time, so that those opinions and those theories can have a common language? You get what I'm saying? How do we deconstruct those at the same damn time? So that's like two questions in one. But another question is, I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions.
Don't be sorry.
I hope y'all following me though.
That's what this is for.
So another one is this. I think you said disassociating versus engaging. So as a student leader, and yes, I'm a Bennett Bell. Thank you so much. True to thee, yes, ma'am. I think that's hard for me, because I am a natural born leader, not to toot my own horn, but you just know when you know. You know you have a calling on your life, and I am one of those people. So if I see something, I have to speak up. I am not one of those people that has to be silent. And don't get me wrong, everyone is an activist in their own way. We need the people that write the questions. We need the people that knock on doors. And I can do both, but I am more so in the field, and that's who I am. I like to take accountability, but I also like to call out for you to take accountability, right? And so as a student leader, how do I disassociate with something that is happening right in front of me? Because I know I have to take my mental health seriously. I know technically it's not my responsibility, it's the college's responsibility, especially HBCUs overall. But like, how do we do that? Like, how exactly do we disassociate versus engage it? Because we know for damn sure that it's not gonna get done unless we say it. You get what I'm saying? So that's another one. And the last one, I promise. Past becomes future. I think you talked about that. I think for me, how do we make sure that our people are not settling? Because see, I don't think that it's a problem for us as a Black community to come together and try to fix whatever we have to solve. But I think the problem is we're settling. Like, for example, I'm gonna use reparations as an example, right? Our elders wanted freedom, right? Our elders wanted freedom, but their elders did not want freedom, right? Their elders told them to stay at home and not go to protest, not vote, not do those things because you would get killed or you would get something, right? But it keeps progressing and progressing and progressing. But in a certain amount of years, I just feel like we're settling, right? We don't want to decolonize every single thing because we feel like, I don't know, it's too much work, or we just feel like it's not, how can I say this? Like, for example, microaggressions, right? If you are having a certain attitude towards me because I'm a Black woman, there's nothing micro about that. You get what I'm saying? So how do we as a community not settle for soft racism? Like, how do we do that? That's all the questions.
It better be. No, I'm playing. Listen, stand right there, because I want you to sit right there. I want you to sit by Ms. Joyce as you're getting these responses. Do you know Ms. Joyce? Y'all gonna get to know each other very good. And I want, if each panelist could maybe summarize your response in like a 30 to 45 second space, because we got one more person behind. And I don't want to cheapen that response, but maybe take a minute or so and just respond. I'm not going to put you on the timer, but we're at 5:25. So any person that wants to start, you can go, because she directed them at. She had a one for every person up here.
I'll say to the part about what you said, kind of addressing our elders, I think, one, it has to be done with sensitivity. I grew up in like that community-based type of household, but just trying to, one, it has to be addressed with sensitivity, but then you also have to understand what they went through too. You know, especially these two right here. If after what they've been through, I'd be doing this work till I die. You know what I mean? And so I think just getting to know the stories, being on their level, getting to that same type of education. You'll never get that type of experience, but you'll always have that type of education. You can educate yourself. You can be more educated, honestly. Educate yourself about what happened. Get to know the people you want that torch from. You know, that position, that place that you want to be, get to know who that person is, and then the torch may be lit, you know? So it's that fire the both of you have that lights that torch. I know that was so metaphorical, but still.
It was. That's good.
Well, first, I think that language matters. So what we say and what we mean by what we say matters. So we need to throw it in the trash. We need to throw the whole thing away, throw microaggression away. I think that's one of the most harmful terms that we use. So like there is no such thing as a microaggression. It's all aggression. It's all racist aggression. I don't care if you try to say it pretty, say it nice, sugarcoat it, it's still racist aggression. So that's number one. And I think that to answer that question as well about bringing or connecting with elders, but also bringing in these very different perspectives. And so with the elder question, I'm gonna try to do this real quick. With the elders, I think I believe there is often a fundamental lack of understanding of what people, similar to what Miles just said, what people have gone through and what people have experienced. One of the things I hate, I have hated hearing and continue to hate it if I hear people say it is, well, I ain't my ancestors. I ain't my granddaddy. I ain't.
Look just like them.
The hell you are? What do you mean? Like, you would not, I describe it this way. If you had to carry what they carry, you would die. So how do you honor that while also realizing we can't just stay there? And so I think that is, we must honor that, but also say, this is where we need to go. And in terms of bringing together those voices, I think one of the things that is most important is that we have to identify it as at the end of the day, we have to respect and honor human beings. Handle people with dignity. And so I think that even if we differ on it, and Dreama introduced the term, I forgot the way she referred to it, but yes, we may have different perspectives or different theories or whatever the case may be, but how are you dignifying people? How are you bringing dignity to a situation? How are you bringing dignity to people? And I think when we don't approach people with dignity, when we don't approach people in love, that's when it all falls apart. I think you can do more even with differing views when you, as Reverend Nelson will say, walk with people. So I'm approaching you with dignity. I'm bringing love to the equation and not I have to be right. I'll put it this. Sorry, Marcus, and I'll put it this way. Do you? I had it told to me this way, and as it relates to marriage. So maybe that's something that you get to experience one day. But are you more committed to being right or more committed to a relationship? And so I think that that's what we have to do in terms of with the different views and bringing our community together. We must be committed to relationship and not I have to be right or I need to say it. Yeah.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have this last question, and then what we're going to have closing us out, Dreama and Serena will wrap up the response to both questions and their final remarks. Does that sound fair? All right.
It's a very simple question. My name is Brittany Morgan. I'm a local organizer. My question is, I know we talked a lot about the youth within college, what we're going to do for the youth organizing, college students, all of this. But what about the youth that isn't in college? I know sometimes we always miss that population. Even me trying to start a nonprofit for mental health, I'm like, well, what am I going to do about students who can't show up to college because of certain issues, systematic issues?
We talked about that fish in a pond, the systematic issues. So what strategies from you all are you using to reach youth? Because I'm trying to help too, so I was thinking maybe you can give me some ideas on how I can reach people my age that aren't in college and didn't have access to a college education.
That's why you should have been up here on this panel, but that's another conversation. Next year, we're going to have her on the panel. All right.
I just want to start with, I want to share a definition of leadership that we use in our organization. We use Marshall Gantt's definition of leadership is about accepting responsibility to enabling others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. So I heard you talk about being a leader, and so I think all good leaders make more leaders.
That's right.
And so my thing to you as well is, how do you reach folks? Is you go to where they are and you help develop them into leaders, and then they'll go find more people like them. And so that is our responsibility as leaders, is to continue to grow more leaders and bring more people into this movement, into leadership.
I think you had many questions in there, and maybe what came to mind most as I was listening, maybe not having a perfect answer to any of them, was that I resonated with your question around how do we disassociate ourselves with things that don't align with our values or that we disagree with. And I'm not the best at social media. I haven't even figured out how to use TikTok exactly. But I have kids, and they mostly help me do that. What I see in these forums is it's so distant, right? Like, we disagree with something, and then we cancel, we delete, we don't engage, we just block. And the thing that this made me think about was what we're really doing in terms of democracy. Like, why do we want to hear from all the members of our community about which road should be fixed or which? And it is fundamentally about our interconnectedness as people, as human beings. And I worry, even as I don't know how to use social media that well, that those substitute for real disagreements, for talking to people who we don't think like. There's a great cost to not being able to talk to people that we disagree with. And the biggest cost of all is like disengagement. And that's the biggest threat to democracy I think there is individualism, is the idea that I can figure out what's right and what's wrong, and if somebody disagrees with me, I don't have to listen to them, and I can be self-contained and somehow move through the world as though I haven't given up what's most important about this democracy. And so I think I would just say it's so important that we do talk to people that we disagree with, that we name why we disagree, and that we stay in those conversations even if those positions never shift. I think that that's the only way we actually get to change things that we don't agree with. And I hope that answered some of your question.
Marcus, can I share?
Yes, you can. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to share a quote before I know in a lot of times we feel like we're voting between the lesser of two evils, and I just really wanted to share this quote that just says, voting isn't marriage, it's public transportation. You're not waiting for the one who's absolutely perfect. You're getting on the bus, and if there's one who comes to your destination, you do not travel, you take the one that will get you the closest. And so I think a lot of times we go, we don't like this candidate, we don't like this person isn't electable, this person isn't. That is not what it's about. It's not about that individual. And particularly once we understand in movement politics that when we have a people's champion on the ticket, every single one of us is on that ticket with that person.
Wow. Let's give all of our panelists one more round of applause, and all of you for staying. And I'll tell you what, I've been told by Bridget that you have won the grand prize. You want to know what the grand prize is? Yeah. You all get to join us at 417 Arlington at the Beloved Community Center for a block party. There's music, there's games, food. We get a chance to mix and mingle, have more of this conversation. And so please come with us immediately after this over to Beloved. I also want to shout out Lewis Pitts. If you have not known who Lewis Pitts is, I've come to know him in the past 3 weeks and have found him to be, just like Gary, another brother that is in the fight with us. Lewis was one of the leading attorneys during the massacre, Greensboro massacre, and also has led the charge from Greensboro around what is happening with Justice Anita Earls. The only black woman left on the state Supreme Court is being lynched politically. And if we are not careful, it's not a ballot initiative that's going to stop that. We have to make sure that they know that it is not right, not on our watch. And I want to thank you, Lewis, for what you're doing and that work, because that is critical. And I want to make sure we keep this conversation. Yes. Let's keep this conversation going. I know we had a lot of rivalry about HBCUs, but I'm going to let you know one thing. What good is it to claim that North Carolina A&T is the largest HBCU in the nation when it's not even the largest school in Greensboro? We're missing the forest for the trees. Equality will let us think that we are greater than, but equity will teach us that together, the HBCUs collective, with those in community college, with those that are 18 to 34 that are not in school, as Fannie Lou Hamer would say, a PhD or no D, working together is what's going to make the difference. God bless you all and good evening.